Okay, so we're on the still continuing lesson 3.1, and we're on the back page. Okay, so looking at this graph, Cheyenne, will you shut that door for me, please? Thank you. Okay, so looking at this graph, I want to first determine if this is a continuous graph or discrete. So look at your notes on the front page on the difference between discrete and continuous. So since everything is connected, this is a continuous graph. Okay, to figure out the domain. So domain is the x value, so ignore the y right now. Look for the smallest x that's being used. So the smallest that has a point being used is at 0. That's the smallest x we're using. And if you keep going, the biggest x is going to be here. If you look, the graph is going by 3s, so I'm just going to assume that's probably 30. So the domain is all numbers from 0 to 30. The range, now the range is just the y values. The smallest y value that is actually used is 0. And then it uses everything up until right here, which is that 36. Okay, number 5. Now this is where the domain and range get a little tricky, is when we're dealing with word problems. A local sales clerk is going door to door trying to sell vacuums. For every vacuum he sells, he makes $10. He can sell a maximum of 8 vacuums a day. So first we're going to sketch a graph. So if he sells 0 vacuums, how much money does he make?
0.
So put a dot at 0, 0. No. If he sells 1 vacuum, how much money? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. You'll notice the graph is going up by 20s, so 10 is going to be in the middle. If he sells 2 vacuums, how much money does he make? 20, so put a dot there. 3 vacuums, 30. What's the maximum amount of vacuums that he's going to sell? 8. So keep going up until you hit those 8 vacuums. So 4 vacuums is $40. 5 is 50, 6 is 60, 7 is 70, and 8 is 80. Okay, now I need to determine if I'm going to connect the dots or not. So can you sell part of a vacuum? No. So don't connect the dots. If we don't connect the dots, that is called discrete. Okay, the domain now is the x values. So looking at just the x values, if it helps, list them out. So for the x, we use 0, we used a 1, a 2, 3, so on and so forth until we hit 8, right? So the way I want to write that, I always put the smallest number first. So the smallest x I use is 0. I put the x in the middle. And then I put the largest x that we use at the end, so the 8. X can be 8, so it gets part of an equal sign. And x can be anything less than 8. X can be 0, so put part of an equal sign. And then x can be anything that's greater than 0. And then we have to show, bless you, that we're not using every single number from 0 to 8, because we're not using 3.2. We're not using 5.5. So the way we're showing that we're just using these numbers is we're going to add a little disclaimer on there that it's only whole numbers. So that way you know it's not every single decimal fraction in between. Okay, your range now is your y values, so look at just the y-axis. And then we're going to list out the y's that are being used. we actually used 0, so include 0. The next dot was at 10, then 20, 30, all the way up to the largest dot that was actually used is 80. Remember, don't put whatever the highest number is that's on the graph because it wasn't used. So it's whatever dot was used. Okay, for the range, we put the smallest number first. Then we'll put our variable. Here we're going to use a y. The largest y value that's used is 80. 80 was used, so it gets part of an equal sign. So y can be 80, and then y was anything less than 80. Y was 0, so it gets part of an equal sign, and then y was greater than 0. So the greater than part is facing the 0. It's not all numbers, though. It's only multiples of 10. So the range is 0 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 80. Only multiples of 10. Okay, go to number 6. Read number 6 and see if you can determine which graph they're talking about, and then tell me if it's discrete or continuous. Okay, for this one, they are charging for cups of lemonade. You can't sell part of a cup, so you're not going to connect the dots, so it's not going to be C and it's not going to be D. Each cup is $1, so it's going up with a linear type graph, so A is the correct graph. And then that is, since you don't connect the dots, that's called discrete. How many people did get that right? Okay, today's exit ticket is on HMH. When you have to graph, when you get to, I think there's a question, I want to say it's question 7. You have to be very specific with your lines. It is a pain in the butt to try and figure it out the first time, so just take your time, help your neighbors on how to do the graphs when you have to sketch them out. When you're done, if you have work that you owe me, that's what you're working on.